Winston Churchill, who had called him a seditious fakir, and did not take too kindly to this half-naked man who came for the second roundtable conference. For the students who are here, I will begin by saying something extremely controversial, which I will justify at the end. Gandhi was an astute politician. I say this because if ever there was a man in the history of India, and allow me to correct myself, if ever there was a man in the history of the world who knew how to kickstart a mass movement, it was Gandhi. He knew how to feel the pulse of the people. He knew how to use symbols. So the charkha, the salt, were only symbols that Gandhi was using for the lowest common denominator. Yeah. Since I'm mandated to speak on nonviolence in the women's movement, I will come back to what I have said at the end. Before that, I must talk a bit about nonviolence and women's movement in India, because that's my mandate. The women's movement in India was built upon a social reform movement of the 19th century. Women in India did not make a homogeneous group, neither then nor today. They're not a homogeneous lot, because the problems that they face in development, for instance, it varies in kind and degree according to the situations that they face as a class, caste, religion, community. So depending upon that background, they face their problems. Gandhi understood this divide about women. When he came back from his long sojourn in South Africa, he knew about this lack of unity. And because he knew about this lack of unity, it was Gandhi who made a very deliberate attempt to weave the needs of women into the fabric of the national freedom movement. Of course, which is not to say that Gandhi was not critical about traditional customs of India, whether it was sati or the parda or untouchability or child marriage or the social outcasts that they did of widows. The age-old tradition of the temple Devdasis made an indelible impact on Gandhi's mind, and at the same time, he was equally disturbed about the prevalence of child prostitution in India. And though he believed in the institution of marriage, I think it goes to the credit of Gandhi, who was uniting all women, because he said that the women in the institution of marriage were not meant to be slaves of their husbands. Wives, he maintained, ought to be comrades and friends to their husbands. Now, women in India, I think, could not have wished for a better champion for their cause. Now, the next question that arises is, what is it that made women rally around Gandhi? Paradoxical as it may seem, Gandhi believed that it was the strength of the woman actually lay in her weakness. So in the 1925 February edition, which was just read out by Aparnaji, he wrote, and I quote, "To call women the weaker sex is a libel. If by strength is meant moral power, then a woman is immeasurably man's superior. If nonviolence is the power of our being, then the future is with women." So it was his belief in the core strength of women, which is the genesis of the entire women's movement during the struggle for freedom in India. For Gandhi, the strength of a woman lay in her gentleness, her dedication, her tolerance, her maternal instinct to love and to nurture creation. So women for him were the best source to establish a non-violent society, which is not to say that there wasn't any violence in society at that time, or there wasn't any violence which emanated from young girls. There were 2 young girls who had killed a district magistrate who was British, because revolutionary literature does tend to romanticize, and to some extent, it fires the imagination of the young, including girls, about violence against the one who was oppressing them. But these were very few instances, far and few in between. So Gandhi was actually appealing to the non-violent strength of women to gain victory. Gandhi knew how to appeal to them emotionally. I'm coming back to telling you that he was an astute politician, because Gandhi created an image of women in the historical context, whereas for Gandhi, the quest was political. It was to liberate India, and in order to liberate India, he did need to involve all the women along with him. Another characteristic of the women's movement at that time was that from the isolation and confinement of the four walls of their homes, they came out with breathtaking energy into political life. This is something which is very difficult to explain, but it is so because Gandhi managed to speak to the lowest common denominator. He spoke to women in the idiom of Hindu religion and culture. So the ideas of Gandhi were progressive, but the delivery may have been conservative. I am not saying that in some subjects Gandhi did not have patriarchal views or Gandhi did not have a patriarchal bias. But I think what is endearing about Gandhi was that he was an extreme liberal. He was an extreme liberal to the extent that he never would have any qualms about revisiting his own beliefs, and he would have no qualms about making amends or even confessing to his mistakes. So that is where Gandhi was extremely liberal. So it is quite possible that with the encouragement, I mean, when I say that it was with breathtaking energy that they sprang into political life, what I meant was that one moment they were not there, and the next moment they were all out there, right in the front, picketing foreign liquor goods and foreign liquor shops, or selling khadi, or accompanying the poetess Sarojini Naidu for the salt satyagraha, walking maybe if not those 200, at least those 100 miles. So it is Gandhi who gave them that source of inspiration. And it is Gandhi who also gave away in his writings. When he writes a letter to Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, he writes to her as to what was the source of inspiration for him. He admitted that in his married life, Kasturba proved to be a very unwilling slave. And it was her capacity for resistance which actually gave Gandhi his mission. Gandhi actually woke up to his mission with the capacity of resistance that Kasturba displayed. I also want to take another dimension of Gandhi, which is the child in Gandhi. Now, the child in Gandhi had nonviolence deeply etched into his psyche. When he was leaving for London to study law, and he went for the blessings of his mother, it was a very reluctant Putli Bai who made him take a vow, which Gandhi did, that Gandhi would not touch wine, women, and meat. Now, to respect the honor of a woman and not to cause harm to animals for the selfish gratification of oneself was itself ahimsa. Not to violate the space of another was nonviolence. Little wonder then that when it came to Gandhi's formation, or when it came to Gandhi's values, which he cherished, they came from his mother. And it was again a woman who displayed to him the power of resistance. So obviously, it was only obvious that if this was the background, then women in general would have benefited and would continue to benefit from Gandhi in good measure. So this was the link that Gandhi had with women. When he writes to Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, very often we read out and we quote because we think that he's writing to Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, but he's not. He is actually addressing the entire womanhood when he says that man has delighted to enslaving you, and you have proved willing slaves, till the slaves and the slaveholders have become one in the crime of degrading humanity. He was in search of a woman, he said, who would realize Ba's admission mission because Kasturba had finished a task. So when he asks Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, are you that woman? Will you be one? Gandhi was actually speaking to women because he was drawing them. He was drawing them into that movement which was going to be the national movement for India's freedom. And for them, he also wanted. See, when I say he's an astute politician, or that he was an astute politician, I do not mean a politician in the sense that you understand it today. He had a goal in mind. He had to liberate India. He wanted to involve people. And being a lawyer and understanding constitutional law, he knew what all women needed. He knew that what they needed had taken the Western countries centuries of struggle, and he was going to get it for them overnight, the constitutional rights. So he wanted their participation to justify the freedom struggle. He wanted their participation in the national movement. Then is this not the essence of the women's movement in India yesterday and today and tomorrow? Not to be willing slaves to the dictate of others? To taste emancipation economically, socially, politically, in body, mind, and spirit, morally and spiritually. It is when women started looking upon Gandhi as one of themselves that Gandhi's task was done, because Gandhi had managed to conquer the cleavages that existed in society amongst women, because like I told you, he spoke to the poor, uneducated woman in the idiom that she understood. Now, satyagraha and women is what I'm coming to. For him, it was the most powerful weapon of a nonviolent movement. What did it entail? It entailed defiance. It entailed peaceful breaking of laws, protesting, obstructing, picketing, squatting, publicly challenging or resisting wrong. Women were peace lovers, he knew. He knew this will appeal to them because biologically they were the caregivers. So satyagraha was obviously a very useful weapon to give into the hands of women who would use it for justice and equality. Now, what is it that we gained? The question is that. What is it that we gained through satyagraha and through following Gandhi? The constitutional guarantee of equal rights for women, equality before law and equal treatment of law, and the universal adult franchise, which some of these things took centuries of labor in the Western world, and we had actually got it overnight. What went wrong? That is the question. Both these guarantees, they fail to bring about any social or material change in the lives of the majority of women in India, or in the patriarchal mindset of society in general, because patriarchy remains so deeply entrenched in India that it influences the structure of social and political institutions. Equality of opportunity and status remains an ornament that today adorns the preamble and the pages of the Constitution of India. Thus, it is a story of negotiation and conflict. It is the story of negotiation and conflict between patriarchy and the women's movement, which is central to the development of India into a modern nation state. Today, this has been accepted by the government because fortunately for the women's movement, it was made easy in 1974 when a standing committee of parliament reported on the status of women and said that their position was worse than what it was in 1911. So what rocks? What rocks the women's movement today? I would say there are two issues. I'm sorry, I am addressing the political part of it because I am a political scientist, so that's a dimension I can talk about with you. One is the Uniform Civil Code, and the other is the Reservation Bill for Women. Now you see, Plato rightly said that power corrupts, Plato rightly said that the strife in society takes place only over limited goods. So this is the fight for us. The Uniform Civil Code has obviously been diluted because the Shah Banu case got diluted with the Muslim women's bill, protection of rights on divorce. It took away from them even what they had prior to the bill. But that's a subject of yet another discussion. Who shut it down? The male benches in the legislature. Let's talk about reservation for women, seats in parliament. I don't understand why it is only 33%. Of course, it ought to be 50%. But there again, the male benches in the legislature, they have suggested the quota within quotas. So we are going to have an OBC quota, a minority quota. So what have they managed to do? They managed to kill the movement, or I would say divide the women's movement on communal lines. I guess the question that we need to answer is whether there is an Indian women's movement at all, and whether Satyagraha is relevant to it today. Or is it just a dead letter? Coming to the first one. The term Indian women's movement is highly contested because there is nothing called a singularity of women. There is nothing called politically and cultural. There is no political, cultural collectivity called women. We are divided. It is, in fact, more characterized by differences, by diversity, by conflict. But not all is lost because we have the contours of a women's movement in the making with the capacity, with the networking capacity of many associations of women and many associations who are linked with voluntary organizations of women who could well be networking and getting off the women's movement of the kind that we had during the struggle for freedom going once again. But of course, they will have to address. They will have to address the competing claims, the caste claims, the class claims that there are. Whether Satyagraha is relevant in lighter vein, if it weren't, I don't think we would have collected here for this seminar. But most seriously, I would like you to go back to the Salt March of Gandhi's, because I maintained in the beginning that he was an astute politician. You see, history remembers the Salt March as one of the greatest episodes of resistance that there ever was in the last century. He started on the 12th of March, 1930, from his ashram with a cadre of about 78 followers. And Gandhi walked 200 miles, reached the edge of the ocean, waded through the water, collected what was actually water evaporating and leaving behind sediments, because he was challenging a British law that you could buy salt only from the government, and that you could not make your own. It was followed by a Gandhi-Irwin Pact in 1931, where Gandhi could not negotiate to the extent that people expected him to negotiate. In fact, the insiders in the Congress were so bitterly disappointed that Nehru even exclaimed that he had lost something of himself, never to recall again. So what was it about that salt satyagraha that I'm pointing out to tell you whether satyagraha is relevant today or not? What Gandhi had was a symbolic demand and a symbolic victory. It works very differently from conventional demands. When we make a conventional demand, we are very sure about having done our research on the demand and about the winnability of the demand. And then the group that demands leverages all power available to it in order to make it succeed. This is not how it works with mass movements. That is a completely different ball game. The key measure there is not whether it is winnable or it is not winnable. That is not the key measure. A demand is an instrument. When we, in normal lives, make a demand, we might say we want a red light at this place because it is dangerous, and we put our mind to it and we bargain for it. But when it is a symbolic demand, the idea behind that demand is to make the politically unimaginable politically inevitable. That is the idea behind a symbolic demand. And the momentum of a mass movement has to be built up around a strategy where you say that this is of moral significance. It has to be dramatized to call the attention of the public, because what you're really doing is that you're shifting political climate and you're shifting public opinion in favor of yourself. Or to put it another way, activists with their demands tap into broader principles which touch far more many lives to make negotiations at the end of the movement. This was the beginning of his movement. He was putting people together. He was putting women also together. And he was rocking the boat for the British because he was using salt as a symbol. That was the earth. He was referring to what is the earth for you. And he shook the empire right up to London. They were absentee lords sitting there. Quite obviously, they would call him a seditious fakir because they knew better than us at that time that Gandhi was an astute politician. It is in this sense that I call him one. Thank you.